Welcome to Cordkillers Reckoning. The world of entertainment is turned upside down, and we're just trying to find out how to watch what we want, where we want, whenever we want. I'm Tom Merritt. Brian, where is the good stuff?
Man, apparently it's in the sick bass in my ears. This is the first time I put on like proper headphones for the show. Our theme song is a banger, man.
Boom, boom.
Yeah. It's got that deep groove. Like,
yeah.
If
bounce along in your lowrider.
Our speakers are in your earpod buds, whatever. Those things in your ears.
Ear friends. That's what I call them.
I'm saying get that theme song's bass into your life is what I'm saying.
Well, we are in both your ears right now, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get right to the supply run.
Supply run.
That's not a segue when you do it that way. I just want to point that out because it's not a segue when you just go unrelated thing. So here is.
Hold on. Now we have a double negative because the Tom Merritt rule is it's not a segue if you point it out. But if you point out that it's not a segue.
Does that make it a segue?
It is a segue now.
Amazing. Now I can't talk about it anymore, though. Comcast reported its earnings. We don't do a lot of earnings stuff on the show, but when Comcast or Netflix or Amazon do their earnings, sometimes they'll mention stuff that is useful for you to know as a consumer. Comcast saw good results in its mobile business at the box office, thanks to Wicked and The Wild Robot, and at its Peacock streaming hub. Peacock revenue rose 27.8%. Peacock had 36 million subscribers. That's up 5 million from the last time they reported them. Here's the bad news, Brian. Comcast said it lost 311,000 cable TV customers. You're probably not shocked, right? It lost 139,000 broadband customers as well.
Okay. Well, I have a hard time cheering for Comcast in any situation. Give me a reason to not be like, good, take that, Comcast.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I guess if you like the content, like The Wild Robot, right? If you want more of that or more Wicked or whatever, you want Comcast to do well so it can keep making good things that you enjoy. If you're somebody who doesn't like their services, though, you're not going to care. I just found it interesting where our narrative till now has always been, the big cable guys are going to lose cable TV customers, but they're going to increase their broadband customers because you'll need the internet to get everything. And so it is interesting to me that not only Comcast losing 139,000 broadband customers, Charter, aka Spectrum, shed 177,000 internet customers during Q4, finishing with 30.1 million. And they also lost 123,000 cable TV subscribers, but I don't think anybody's shocked by that. Interestingly, though, side note on the cable TV numbers, Spectrum now has 12.3 million cable TV subscribers in the US. That's getting close to YouTube TV's 8 million, which is the leading streaming provider. So we're starting to see those numbers come to parity. But the bigger number that is interesting to me is the fact that cable internet companies are losing their internet subscribers. We're not losing internet subscribers nationally. So where are they going?
That's exactly, you beat me to the punch. I mean, the big obviously the elephant in the room would be Starlink, I would imagine. Is Starlink public about how many subscribers that they've picked up?
Not exactly, but there's also just not enough total subscribers to make a difference, right? Like even if they'd gotten all their subscribers yesterday, that's not going to account for this. Starlink is early and growing fast, but it's still small. It looks from the best. I wrote about this on my my personal newsletter on Friday. The best I can tell, it looks like the people are going to fixed broadband or wireless broadband internet. So Verizon and AT&T are gaining home subscribers. So you're seeing a lot of people moving to that because it's cheaper. And they're like, well, I can either pay this $100 a month thing for Comcast, but now that I'm not bundling my cable TV anymore, who cares? Let me just get Verizon's thing because it's $50 a month. Some people are just relying on their phone. They're like, I get internet on my phone. That's going to be my internet from now on. Some people are doing that. And there are more regional competitors than there used to be. There are more municipal networks, more regional fiber networks being rolled out. Some of them from the big guys like AT&T, some of them from smaller companies. There just seems to be more competition, and it's not working for cable to say, yeah, you have to get us. We're the only option, except in places like where I live, where it's still the only option.
Well, so you probably have your finger on the pulse more than I, because over in DTNS land, you have folks, you cover all of technology. Is it a thing that people just aren't using their laptops are just always on Wi-Fi, occasionally tethering, and that's enough? They don't need their own home service? Is anybody really just living on mobile?
I don't have a number to put on it, but I will guarantee you it's probably in the millions, not thousands, low millions of people who are like, yeah, I predominantly use mobile internet.
Well,
like
and
not home internet provided by T-Mobile or Verizon, but like my phone is my internet.
Well, and that works if you have a laptop. That becomes very easy to imagine. You hit one button on your phone, you're on the internet with your laptop, and outside of that, you're on the road and you're using whatever Wi-Fi is around. And the only time it sounds weird is when I think of a desktop user. And as I understand it, I'm increasingly in the minority of loving my desktop rigs.
Found it. Pew Research Center says 15% of U.S. adults are smartphone-only internet users, meaning they own a smartphone but do not subscribe to home broadband service.
Now, I assume all of them have access to a computer, or they just are maybe internet cafe kind of things, or
they might be tethering, right? Or they might just not use a laptop at home. They just use the phone. That is something that old people like us find hard to imagine.
It really is, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. Although I guess I can imagine you're young and fit and buff, and your face isn't sagging. Sorry, I might get in the weeds here, but you work a day job where you're at a computer all day, and you're able to use that desktop for writing your emails and stuff. And then you go home, and at that point,
a lot of people just do it all on their phone anyway.
I want to come in here and say that I have several children that are in the 24 to 19 range, 18 range. And all of them would rather use their phone if possible. Their phone is their first action, whereas our generation, we're on the computer, and then we'll use the phone if we have to, or if we are away from our computer. They will be sitting next to their computer and prefer to use their phone over using their computer to access the internet for most things. And that's universal between all 5 of my children that have in that age range.
Yeah. It's what you grew up with, right? Yep. Kids often, I don't know about yours, Amos, but kids often grow up with access to the phone as being their primary way of accessing the internet. They have to share a laptop or don't even have access to a PC. That's the only way they do it. So that's how they learn to access it.
And when they hit a bump where they can't use the phone, they have to, because it requires a plug-in or something like that, or, certain certificates, things like that, they will that becomes a high barrier to completion for them.
Mm-hmm.
So
they'll just bail on whatever that is.
Yep.
If they don't need it. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's why people, I sometimes get comments from people who are, and thank you for that, Amos, by the way. I sometimes get comments from people who are like, who watches Netflix on their phone? Well, there you go. 15% of US adults that only have smartphone internet probably watch Netflix on their phone most often.
Yeah, boy, I'd hate to imagine that is, there was some night a few months ago that I was up late and I was like, let me just revisit an old classic. And so I was watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind on my phone. And I'm not going to lie, Tom, I was kind of astonished at how close it felt to being in the theater with the displays. Not bad. It takes a little bit to calibrate your brain into, I'm looking at a 4-inch display, but it, in my mind, it lives like I was seeing it in the theater.
If I transport my 1995 self to now in the same condition, like back then, I did not have cable. I did not have a car. I lived in a studio apartment. I had over-the-air TV, and I would record some of it on VHS to watch later. And I had dial-up internet. To me, I'm like, yeah, if this were now, I probably would have had a mid-range smartphone with an internet connection, and that's would have been my internet connection. That would have been my TV.
Yeah, and you know what the real deal is like my wife Bonnie of all folks has been using the AirPlay feature a lot on the television down there. In fact, she turned on Silo the other day, and I was like, oh, here we go. Get ready for audio and video to not sync up, or get ready for, I steeled myself for literally anything to be less than extraordinary. Guess who had egg on his face? It looked great. We watched the whole show, and it's like, I guess TVs can be good now.
Yeah. Yeah. That technology has really worked out a lot of the kinks, and Google Cast the same way. It's a lot more solid, to the point that like hotels are now, the news is hotels having, new ways for you to cast when you come into your TV, not like, we've added the ability to do it. Like, it's really a whole new thing. Couple other things out of the Comcast earnings worth pointing attention to. President Mike Cavanaugh talking about SpinCo, the yet to be named, yet to be spun out version of all the cable networks from Comcast, said SpinCo will be a freestanding, strong collection of businesses with lots of cash flow generation capability for many years to come. A good market position and a great focus. When they're ready to talk about their strategy, which will be at some point down the road, we'll come back.
I want so bad to make fun of them, but Tom, here's the truth. We were talking just before the show about how over the last 6 months, I've been rehabbing the studio and stuff. And a big part of that is because my number one major goal was to make good on my promise to all the Founders Club folks by having the Eclipse event. And then once that happened, I didn't really have a strategy, and it showed. Everyone could sniff it in the YouTubes. They're all like, what are you doing now? And the answer, of course, was, I don't know. But what it really was I am going through the entire production pipeline. So I figure out what I have. And once I've completed an assessment, the path will be clear. And I would say I'm like 72 hours into my path becoming clear. And so I don't want to be bagging on SpinCo for essentially doing the responsible thing. Like, they knew they had to spin out all of the fat, and they knew it wasn't entire garbage. But at this point, everything is in the SpinCo bucket. And somebody is doing a version of exactly what I've done for the last 6 months. They're going through, assessing each of their properties, figuring out who are we reaching, what do all of these what's the commonalities in all these demographics, groups, what buttons do we have to push? It's the only way to come up with, okay, I got it. I see the path forward now. And so, yes, this is transparently a admission that they are figuring it out, but that's also the right move for them to do right now.
They figured out which parts of the business will bring down Comcast P&L, right? And it's everything that is a cable network that isn't Bravo, and it's everything that's digital that isn't Peacock. Like that's a short version of that, right? So what they're doing now is figuring out, well, what do we do with that? There was a comment from Comcast CEO Brian Roberts saying 98% of the viewing on Peacock does not include this fund networks. And what he means is the networks that are going into SpinCo, 98% of the viewing on Peacock doesn't include them. So I've been sort of joking like, yeah, they kept Bravo because it's cheap to produce. It's the only one that makes money, which is partly true. But also it sounds like people do watch Bravo content on Peacock. So they want to keep it feeding Peacock. Here's the other part of what Brian Roberts said. They need their own direct-to-consumer digital initiatives and focus and investment. So this is a part of SpinCo. Again, it hasn't spun out yet. It's going to do so later this year. It'll have a different name. But part of SpinCo that we haven't considered, I don't think enough, is that it won't just be, let's run the cable networks until all the cable subscribers go away and then shut them down. It will be, let's let them have a safe space to experiment into going direct to the consumer. So instead of shoving MSNBC or shoving USA Network into Peacock, let's let SpinCo figure out, is there another option that they could do that won't compete with Peacock in-house because it's a separate company? And it'll be really interesting to see that. What digital services does SpinCo come up with? And don't forget, Fandango, Golf Digital, some of their other digital properties from NBC are going into this as well. So Rotten Tomatoes is going to be over there. That's going to be interesting as well if they package these things up together somehow in new and interesting streaming ways, maybe with some, fast services, maybe some subscription services. I would expect to see some things like that if you're only thinking about them as failing cable networks, you probably wouldn't have anticipated.
Yeah. Still having a hard time thinking of them as anything other than failing cable networks, but we're going to get there.
No, I know what you mean. I think they are still going to be the aggregator. That's my prediction is Warner is going to want to sell their failing cable networks. Disney might want to sell some of their failing cable networks. Paramount certainly would like to sell some of their failing cable networks. And there's Comcast ready to buy. Yes, give us your salvage opportunities. We'll shove them into SpinCo and squeeze money out of them. It's what a lot of private equity companies do with failing stuff, right? Except Comcast is doing it for themselves so they can keep the money that they would make on it. That makes sense. But it also sounds like maybe, according to what Brian Roberts is saying, they really want to try to build streaming services out of this, which I don't think I would have predicted until I heard him say that.
So services plural.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Direct to consumer digital initiatives with a plural.
Yeah, I actually like that a lot because the problem with a giant bucket of trimmed out fat is that it looks, smells, and seems like a giant. Keep in mind that in the consumer's mind, more is not always more. Like the example that I made up on this show a while ago is, how do you feel about a Cadillac if somebody excitedly says it's a Cadillac and it comes with a bag of Twizzlers?
Mm-hmm.
That is well, what's wrong with this Cadillac, right? So I wonder if there's a place. Ooh, this is a good question. Let's kick it to the listeners. Cordkillers@gmail.com. Everybody has stream subscription fatigue when it comes to the $5 range. Would you have it? Would you subscribe to a service, an over-the-top service, for maybe 2 or 3 shows, and technically you're getting a network, but it costs $1 a month? Is there a place for a $1 a month network? And what do you think that looks like? For example, the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel, I don't know how I would get it. I go to weather.com and I don't really want to watch it live, although I guess I could picture wanting it to be live on something. But if there was for $1 a month and I don't have to think about it, or a $100 lifetime subscribe to the Weather Channel thing, sure. Always have the ability to turn that on. I'd be down for that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I was thinking, USA Network, that's a brand that you can rehabilitate as a free service, right? You could have a free USA Network, acquire a bunch of the USA shows, like maybe you can kind of pry away Suits from Netflix, and get people it's the USA Network, but free everywhere, or ad free for $1 a month, right? You could do something like that. I could see that. I also think MSNBC tries to go the Fox Nation route, which is, do you like Fox News, but you don't want any of the boring, unbiased stuff? Get Fox Nation.
You like the Fox part, but not the news part.
MSNBC could do the exact same thing, right? And create a streaming service there. I think it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. I'll be interested what they acquire, because while I do think they might try to be a dumping ground for other people's cable networks so they can get their intellectual property and their brands, they'll probably buy other digital properties as well. And I'm curious which ones of those they might buy. Anyway, fascinating stuff from Comcast. Not as fascinating as being a patron at patreon.com/Cordkillers, though.
I just heard about this, Tom. Did you know?
You did.
That almost a decade ago, possibly even longer, well over a decade ago, good God, what's happened to us? We started getting supported, keeping ourselves loud, live, and independent by patrons.
No, why didn't anyone tell us that we had done this 11 years ago?
Nobody told us. They just acted like we knew that it was happening.
Yeah. I had people coming up to me in the grocery store saying, I'm a Cordkillers patron. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And they didn't explain. They just thanked me and went off to buy peas. And I never knew.
Yeah, I mean, you of course know that we brought back Spoiler in Time and made it part of After Talk, but did you know that goes out exclusively to people who visit us at patreon.com/Cordkillers?
Other people hear that?
Yeah, apparently we're being recorded.
Huh. I really honestly had no idea. I mean, I'm really honestly, truthfully, totally lying, didn't have any idea.
Well, at any rate, it turns out if people go to patreon.com/Cordkillers, they can keep us live and independent and get extra stuff.
Yeah, no, exactly. So go do it. Don't wait. Meanwhile, we will continue with the search party. If you were one of the many people saying, gosh, I can't wait for the second half of Squid Game to come, I will correct you and say it's not the second half, it's season 3, but it arrives on June 27th. Netflix has announced Squid Game season 3 arriving on June 27th. And at the same time, Nielsen saying that Squid Game racked up more than 4 billion viewing minutes for the second consecutive week, 4.6 billion between December 30th and January 5th. These Nielsen numbers always lag a little. So yeah, we're talking about month-old numbers at this point, but that is a feat not accomplished since Netflix's Wednesday did it in November 2022. So for all of the angst and complaints and people saying, Squid Game, it wasn't that great, seems like even after people were saying that in its second week out, billions of minutes of viewing still happened.
Yeah, that's extraordinary staying power, which usually is congruent with it's actually quite good. Did you end up watching it?
Yeah. No, we watched it the weekend it came out. I agree with some people that it felt like half a story, which it was. And I probably won't be fully satisfied until I watch season 3 and see the other half of this story. That's why I was making that joke about part 1 and part 2. It kind of feels like half of a season to me, but I liked the half that it did. And some of the things I was worried about when you try to extend a franchise that wasn't meant to be extended, which is what happened with Squid Game, they avoided. They gave me a compelling reason. They satisfied me why he would end up back in the game, and people knowing who he is would still let him do that. Like, it all made sense. And they also broke format some. I won't get spoilery, but there are some unexpected things that you would never have seen in season 1 that they had to do to make it different. And those played for me as well. So yeah, my only complaint, some people said it was cringy or all of that, but my only complaint is that it just didn't complete the story. So I'm left less with like, ooh, fascinating cliffhanger, and more like, I feel like I'm midway. Can you give me the rest of it?
So I wonder if there are two ways you get this kind of staying power. One would be, of course, just supreme quality. It's very, very good and people keep watching it. But I suspect that it sounds like from your reaction that it was good. You know, there's an extra O in there. My suspicion is that it, by virtue of being so big a deal when it came out, it embedded itself in pop culture that enough people are like, well, I got to watch it to get caught up. I got to know what everything's talking about.
Well, and the other thing that could have happened, right, is it's 4 billion minutes viewed. Bunch of people trash it. People go in with preconceived notions. This is not going to be good. They start watching it and they're like, yeah, they're right. This is cringy. And they stop. Then you get 3 billion minutes, right? You get a fall off that second week, and Netflix can still say, hey, 7 billion minutes viewed in the first 2 weeks, second only to Wednesday in the number of minutes. Instead, it sounds like people kept watching it. They were like, yeah, I heard it's not that great, but let me try it. And they watched it all the way through, in which case you get it, rivaling Wednesday with 2 weeks of 4 billion minutes viewed. So I think it's maybe better for more people than people think. The other thing in this Nielsen ratings is Paramount Plus seems to have a hit on its hands. Landman generated 1.3 million minutes viewed during that last week of December. Well, first week of January, December 30th through January 5th. I know nothing about this show, Landman.
It's so funny because all I could think of is the character Jay Landsman from The Wire, he's the big overweight guy in charge of homicide. And so I just picture it as a standalone following his adventures.
It's deep in the heart of West Texas. Roughnecks and wildcat billionaires try to get rich quick in the oil business as oil rigs dominate the state. That's the log line for Landman. They are men looking for land. They are the Landmen, except it's called Landman. So I guess there's just one that we
just
follow.
One.
Yeah. Netflix has greenlighted a reboot of Little House on the Prairie, which has had a bit of recent popularity on Peacock. So I think Netflix very wisely seeing that going like, well, we don't have the original, but let's get the reboot. Rebecca Sonnenshine, who has worked on The Boys and Vampire Diaries and Archive 81, will be the showrunner. The version will be produced by CBS Studios and Anonymous Content Studios, and will follow Charles, Caroline, Laura, Mary leaving Wisconsin to settle in Independence, Kansas. So definitely still following the major outlines of the book series, but they say they're going to tell it in their own way.
How much Oregon Trail-ish do you think we're going to get? Like, because in my mind, Little House on the Prairie was like they're on the prairie. But if they're covering the journey out there, it seems like there's a lot to flesh out there.
Yeah, I don't know how much this literally means that the show will follow the trail of Wisconsin, or whether it's just we're going to begin with them leaving Wisconsin and settling. Because you get that in the original too, like you see them arrive, but they didn't spend a lot of time on the trail, like you say.
Yeah,
so,
but meanwhile, you're talking to somebody who's watched Lonesome Dove a lot, and you can get a lot of mileage out of people move from one place to the other far away.
It could be a big part of the first season. My instinct is that they'll get them to independence pretty quickly, and then we'll follow the story of them living on the prairie the way the original did. A lot of people have made a lot of social media hay about like, well, in this modern day, what does that mean for the story? And I don't need to get into that too much, but they will reimagine it. And it'll be curious to me to see what parts they do reimagine. Because I think a lot of people forget Little House on the Prairie was a show of the 70s, which was also a very, progressive time in storytelling.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The 1970s Little House on the Prairie. This was pre-internet culture, but do you remember the bad girl, the mean girl?
Yes. So I can't remember her name.
Her character was so reviled that when the actor was honored by being in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, just nobody could stop themselves. They booed her. Poor little girl got booed relentlessly. And she was not digging it.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not the character. Yeah. Season 3 of Netflix's popular young adult series Ginny and Georgia will premiere on June 5th. It's been 2.5 years since the January 5th, 2023 release of season 2. Big long wait for the next season of Ginny and Georgia. Kind of a less discussed aspect of streaming culture is we've gone from, yes, you get season 1 in the fall and then season 2 the next fall. Unless it's a mid-season replacement, then you get season 1 January. But if it's doing well, you probably still have it in the fall. Maybe occasionally you bring back a series in Jan. Not anymore. Now we can just go 2.5 years and go, oh yeah, no, we are bringing another version of this back.
I mean, this trend blew my mind when it turns out that Batman Begins was the best of the bunch, and it was like, this is way too soon for a reboot.
You mean the film-wise? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler Perry has announced his new slate of Netflix shows as well. Madea's Destination Wedding and a TV series called She the People. Madea's Destination Wedding will be the second Madea movie on Netflix, but She the People is kind of a legal thriller. It's not part of the Madea universe.
I don't know. I'd like to believe it is. Just canon.
What about this? NHL Hockeyverse Match of the Week, a half-hour animated program that shows a condensed regular season matchup from the prior week played by animated avatars. The first episode is slated to air on Sportsnet in Canada and the NHL Network in the U.S., as well as be available on the NHL YouTube channel, and will feature a recap of, it actually already aired, a recap of the January 25th game between the Vancouver Canucks and Washington Capitals. It was showed on Saturday, February 1st.
This is maybe a brilliant idea. So when you're telling story, for example, let's say you're telling Friday Night Lights, right? And then at some point you have to have the football game that people are playing, right? And so they fill an entire stadium with extras. They have a bunch of acting people who know how to play football do that, but they're looking for key important moments like, spoiler alert for the very first episode, somebody becomes a quadriplegic, right? I wonder how you could write a narrative thing where now it's time for the game, but the game is, just generated on the fly from the game. Because once you have the bone structure and everything, and you robots can map everything out, like that all works in terms of a very clever party trick from an animation standpoint. But the problem is, who are you pleasing with that? Because the moves whatever you're capturing, you're putting a giant red flag on the fact that it wasn't done intentionally. It just happened to be what that game was. So almost certainly if something interesting happens, it's not like the narrative is going to be about it. Does that make sense? What I'm saying is anybody watching it who knows, then these are the actual moves from the game, will also therefore know that Mickey Mouse didn't mean it when he said, "Thanks to you, Brian,"
Yeah. So a few thoughts. First of all, I will admit I should have watched this so I could answer your question intelligently, and I did not. So there's an answer to be had by actually watching the stupid thing that's on YouTube already as of February 1st. So I'll cop to that. However,
we can make that a project for next week.
I
should not be the type of person who just has Brian thoughts on the air.
However, I will. There are already half-hour compressed games that are pretty good at giving you the narrative of a game. A lot of people will rely on them to be like, I didn't get a chance to watch the game. I don't have a lot of time to rewatch a recorded version or on-demand version of the game, but I do have 25 minutes. Tell me the major points. The thing about it is they are very good edits, but they generally don't have narrative. Right? So the edit will give you the narrative, like a good documentary filmmaker narrative can like pull out points that make it feel like it's told intentionally, even though they haven't added a voiceover. They do that, but you also know you're watching a compressed game. So when there's the occasional jump cut or weird situation, you're like, oh yeah, that's just the edit. So you could take that edit and make it the animated program.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're watching an animated program now, and granted, it's targeted at kids, so maybe they're a little more forgiving. But do you need to do other things to make it feel like it's a narrative game?
Well, the being animated opens up a wonderful shorthand that I think could make all of this much more approachable. So, like, if you are a long-term sports fan, you could just see the name or the number on the jersey and you kind of know he's the bad boy or he's the all-star or whatever. But with animation, you can use visual cues, maybe you take somebody's face so it's recognizable as them, but you're pushing him into the hero archetype. So you square up his jaw just a little bit, or somebody who's, clearly in the news thinking about defecting to another team. You sharpen some of his features a little bit. And now all of a sudden you make it visually approachable to outsiders in a way that has never, you know what? I just talked myself into it. This is the most brilliant idea of all time.
Yeah. Amazing. And I guess you can just put up the graphic that says, 3 minutes left in the period and here's the score. And then just go right into it. Right. Like, I'm trying to find it. I'm looking at the NHL YouTube channel to see if I could find it, and it's not immediately available to my eyes. So we shall move on to Netflix's Cobra Kai ending starting February 13th. You will get the last season of Cobra Kai on February 13th.
Man, I really enjoyed that first season, and today I learned it was still going.
And finally, HBO has set Sunday, March 9th as the premiere of the 9-episode fourth and final season of The Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah. Dang,
you're going to watch it, right?
Oh, of course. I have mixed feelings about pandemic plus writer strike really mucking up. Like this should have been a 7-season series, but it
should it have been? Or this is the argument we had last week, so we shouldn't retread the ground. But my position is like, I'm happy that they didn't try to stretch it into 7 seasons when it's only 4. So we'll find out. We'll find out on March 9th.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the buried treasure.
Most people want to know why they suddenly got rich.
Buried treasure.
Buried Treasure, where we talk about some of the things we have been watching lately to kind of help guide you in finding things you might want to watch. Brian, sounds like you have some concerns about something you've been watching.
Tom, I had a really, really good time watching Severance, and I think it was for all the wrong reasons. I enjoyed the heck out of the cinematography. I enjoyed the heck out of the framing.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the heck out of the set design.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, my kid and my wife were both complaining. Nothing was happening. Everyone was just standing around. And I realized, oh, that's right. I'm looking at these things because literally nothing is happening and everyone is standing around.
What's wrong with that?
I don't know. It makes me
if you're enjoying yourself. Now it's wrong for them because they're using the plot doorway. We talk about doorways for stories on Sword and Laser all the time. But if you're enjoying the world doorway, or the set design doorway, which is not one of the major 4 doorways, but we'll make it up.
I'm enjoying.
Nothing wrong with that.
Have you guys talked about the metagame doorway? Because they are definitely, it is performance art outside of the show itself. It is the stunting that they're doing of getting the shots to line up with the things and then bragging about it on Reddit.
No, it's a gorgeous experience. It is, for me, an interesting mystery. But I will agree with you that it's not a fast story. It's not a like, ooh, they're always giving me something to keep me entertained. It's not a plot driven story. In fact, it's quite the opposite. In some ways, this current season has started to remind me of Twin Peaks a little bit.
You know what? I would imagine that when I was younger, if I was watching Twin Peaks, I would be admiring the rich cinematography and the David Lynch of it all. And that's what I'm doing with the Ben Stiller of it all. But boy, oh boy, was last night the first time Bonnie found out that it was directed and produced by Ben Stiller. And then suddenly she had words about Ben Stiller.
Oh, really? Wow. So you're caught up. You were watching the most recent episode when this happened. I'll be honest. I found the first episode of this season to be a little bit draggy, but this most recent episode brought me back to what I love about it, which is people walking around white halls looking at weird things. And you're right. That's not about the story. That's about the world.
It is Liminal Spaces, the show.
Yes. And if you're into that, like, sounds like maybe Brian is, and I definitely am, that's fine. But you should know that and not be coming to it for rich character stories. Well, the characters are actually not the worst part, but the plot. Yeah. I get you.
Were you on the edge of your seat to discover that the innies had innies?
Exactly. So folks, everybody just chill on out about Severance. To that end, I have been enjoying watching a 2-year-old Chinese series called Love Like the Galaxy. It's a period piece set like 200 BC. So it's all about the emperor and a general and putting down rebellions and all of this stuff. But the joy of it is 2 things. One, to our previous discussion, it's beautiful. Like, it's got great music. It's really well shot. The cinematography is excellent. The director on this thing did a stand-up job. So you can just enjoy the richness of these sets and the framing of shots and the ominous, like foreboding general dominating the center of the screen and all of that. And the main character is someone who was kind of abandoned because of the fortunes of war by her family for the first 12 years of her life. And then they return and they're trying to teach her ethics, but she doesn't know anything. So she's us wandering through all of these heavy protocol laden, you can't say that to the emperor, and just like, why not? Like, it's true. And so you get some really comedic moments. One thing about that my wife found that is fascinating. There's a scene where the general is teaching our main character called Niao Niao to ride a horse, right? And she's never ridden a horse before because she's been sheltered and all of that. And in the show, she's scared. He starts the horse going and she starts screaming, stop, wait. And it's very convincing and he's laughing and all of that. Come to find out, there's behind the scenes footage on YouTube. She didn't know they had called action. She thought the horse had taken off wild. He's laughing because he realizes they called action and she doesn't know it. She's screaming because she thinks she's about to get thrown from a wild horse. And the best part is the director coming up. You see his face like, that was great. And then his face falls. He's like, why are you still crying? As he realizes she wasn't acting.
Oh man. Yeah, that's like that famous scene in Alien. Ridley Scott did not inform the crew that blood would be exploding all over them.
Yes, exactly. Except in this case, it was purely unintentional. It was purely an accident. And then they show them all gathered around watching, the playback of the footage, laughing. And she's like, oh my God, I had no idea. All of that. Anyway, it's good stuff. Love Like the Galaxy, available on Viki. If you got something we should be on the lookout for, email us, cordkillers@gmail.com. Brian, probably the biggest work of 2024 was preparing for the launch of new content on DTNS for 2025. And I am proud to say it is launched and it has found people who love it. We're getting new folks subscribing because they hear the new stuff we're doing. So if you have fallen away from Daily Tech News Show, especially if you were like, well, I wanted more discussion or I wanted less discussion and a tighter show, there is something for you. We've got DTNS Live for telling you why things are happening in a big discussion. We've got DTNS Briefing for folks who are like, I just want the analysis. I want the explanation in 30 minutes or less. And we still have Daily Tech Headlines. If you're like, I got no time at all, I just need to know what happened in 5 minutes. All of it available at dailytechnewsshow.com/subscribe.
I tell you what, Tom, look, I think the audience at this point knows that Brian really loves talking about branding and collapsing the superposition and when something gets mushy and when it gets galvanized and clear. I mean, this has been a really big deal for you. How does it feel to be on the other side of like complete clarity of mission, or as writers in Hollywood call it, cracking the story?
Yeah. It was a long iterative process to find out what people's concerns would be and address them. And then very satisfying as people write in with a concern and going like, yep, we knew about that. Here's the answer. Here's how we can help you. Here's what we can do. The very last piece of this puzzle is for patrons of DTNS to be able to get just the episode versions they want, right? Right now, Patreon just gives you everything. So unless you put it behind a tier or something,
again, in theory, which should be great, but a good brand is less is more.
Because we're doing it in a way that's like, this is for this doorway of DTNS listener, and this is for this doorway. Some people are like, is there a way for me to get just this? Patreon just today invited us into their early testing of separate RSS feeds so that you can offer multiple shows through one Patreon. So I have upgraded coming soon to coming very soon, the ability to do that. Get in on the ground floor, get in on the new way of doing things, patreon.com/DTNS. Let's go scan the horizon.
Send a scanning to abort.
Scanning the horizon!
Netflix announced some new features for iOS users this past week. On Wednesday, they gave them something Android folks have had for a while, the ability to download an entire Netflix season with one tap. So up until now on iOS, you had to go in and like download each show that you wanted to watch. Now, if you're like, I'm on a long plane trip, I want to see the entire season 2 of Squid Game, you can do it in one tap.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that it didn't come to iOS first, because it seems like an Android user would be more likely to download and hoard and distribute digital versions than an iOS user. But I mean, good. I'm glad they finally did it.
I sort of alluded to this next one earlier. LG's hotel TVs already support AirPlay, and they're adding Google Cast support as well. These are TVs specifically designed with software to be used by hotels. So ones that have software on it that like let you do the self-checkout and play the demo channel and all of that. Those will now support AirPlay and Google Cast. You'll be able to scan a QR code to begin casting. So you don't have to log in on the TV at all. You don't have to remember to erase your credentials. You just scan the QR code and then play from your phone.
Easy.
Netflix's next To Doom fan event. Remember, it's To Doom, not To Dumb, because that would be dumb.
Yeah. I think I'm almost certainly made this joke before, but it's a GIF, not a GIF. I don't care if you're the one to make it.
Netflix's next To Doom fan event will take place on May 31st in Los Angeles. And for the first time, the company is streaming it on its own platform instead of YouTube. Netflix is like, hey, wait a minute. We can stream things. Let's do that.
Captain Schadenfreude would like a word if they screw this up. I mean,
yes, but they also just did like the NFL and the Tyson Logan Paul fight. Doesn't mean they can't screw this up, but it feels like they're like, oh, you know what? We've done enough live things. I think we could stream To Doom. I think we could.
To be honest, this is the highest stakes stream they've ever done.
in many ways, you're right. The NFL's Access Pass for Legends program has been created to let former players use official NFL game highlights and video footage from the Super Bowl, the NFL draft, just regular games on their YouTube channels without getting caught up in Content ID takedown notices. It lets them keep a share of the advertising revenue that is generated from those posts as well.
This is fascinating because what I think we're seeing is when you join the NFL, we've heard about the people who get paid a pittance and then they injure their bodies. And then, if they're very lucky, they trade on their fame to open a used car dealership or something.
Yeah. Or in the equivalent to this, they're one of the lucky few who get to be a color commentator on the broadcast.
Correct. But in this case, I really like that they're democratizing a path where these players in their post-playing years get to play to their core strengths as personalities, as people with their own fandom. I mean, to be honest, you and I went independent during the Wild West days of the Wild West days. And, we were very fortunate. I mean, on the downside, we didn't have a mega structure like NFL looking out for us, but it's kind of wild that people go into the NFL knowing their second act is going to be the character who talks about the NFL. Yeah.
Especially with so many professional sports players of all kinds having their own social media presences during their playing days. That is way more common than it used to be. You see players, a lot of it has to be curated. Social media managers at teams will have yes or no over a lot of stuff, but they're able to put themselves out there in a way that gives them experience learning how to do this kind of stuff. And then a few of them have gone on to have very successful channels of their own. And now it'll be much easier for them to put video of the things they're talking about without worrying about takedowns and all of that. Finally, Sony has been suing Paramount over CBS's distribution of Sony-produced Jeopardy! The dispute has been that Sony says CBS isn't doing enough to increase revenue. Sony makes the show, gives it to CBS to sell and distribute, and they're like, CBS could be making way more money off this, and we think they're dragging their heels. So Monday, Sony sent a letter to CBS saying, it's just taking over distribution of the show starting February 10th. They've given all the Jeopardy episodes to CBS to distribute that they're going to. And starting February 10th, everybody's going to have to get them from Sony. And of course, CBS is seeking a temporary restraining order. But man, the ball's on Sony there, right?
Well, I mean, let's face it. There are certain programs where the story itself is of significance, it's fulfillment, but really you're buying into the platform, right? It's like, if not this, let's say video game news show, then that video game news show can go, they'll just plug another video game news show into that slot and everyone will still stay there. Jeopardy is a different animal than any other game show. Jeopardy is Jeopardy and people will find where Jeopardy is. And it sounds like this boils down to CBS as a agent working for Ted Jeopardy is failing and just got fired.
Yeah. The way this usually works is that, the distributing arm says, we have people that are uniquely qualified to sell this product. And so give it to us and we'll maximize the revenue. And it's our best interests, right? It is in CBS's best interests to maximize the revenue because they get more revenue too, if they do that. So it's really unusual for a company to say, we think we could do a better job than you are. Like you're not doing your best to CBS. So I'm very curious to see how that all ends up. All right, let's move on to the chatter.
You've got mail.
Got a couple of emails here that kind of go along with each other. Norm writes regarding our Netflix question, how you get Netflix. If I didn't get it for free with my T-Mobile subscription, I wouldn't have Netflix at all. I never watch it. The last show I watched was Lost in Space Season 2. My family, however, watch it, but my kids and spouse could easily find other content. I'm sure I'm an anomaly, but we'll never find out unless T-Mobile decides to stop offering Netflix.
So you'll remember, Tom, the prompt was how much would you pay for Netflix? And so far the emails came in with 0, baby.
Yeah. Well, Norm is an example of somebody who bundles, and that brought us to Brian's question. Brian C. writes, just listening to your discussion on Netflix subscriptions, and I'm curious, is there any idea how many people subscribe to Netflix as part of a bundle? It seems to be the most bundled content provider I see. It's included with ISPs, phone providers, and I get it as part of my Sky TV package. It means that while I may go months without watching something on Netflix, I don't cancel. Not the case for Disney, Apple, or Prime Video, where I can drop them until someone in the house notices. So I asked ChatGPT to do a quick cited analysis, and looking at regional trends and bundled deals, it seems like the best guess analysts have, and nobody has actual numbers from Netflix on this, but the best guess is that roughly 20 to 30% of Netflix's global subscribers might be bundled. And given Netflix's total subscriber count, that would be anywhere between 48 and 72 million subscribers worldwide.
An actual answer.
Yeah. So there you go, Brian. It's a good chunk. This number isn't precise, but it's a decent chunk. George writes, I watched Section 31 a few days ago. It was bad. But it occurred to me that it seemed like what you would get if you asked the people that write Marvel movies to take a swing at a Star Trek movie. Not much plot, shallow characters, fight scenes that are much too long. Seems like a good theory, but I'd like to hear what you guys think of it.
Well, are we committed to that being our?
I think so. The full experience is going to wrap up The Good Place this week. We have not picked our next full experience, although we'll do that on After Talk. But in the meantime, in the interim, we're going to watch Section 31. We'll do it for you. Just to
or as
see.
we put it, we will have the full experience of all of Section 31. For
all one episode of Section 31. Andrew writes, Tom, Brian, and Amos, my wife and I are doing a rewatch of The Wonder Years and just made it past what IMDb considers the ultimate episode, which was great. I also have a strong attachment to the final episode as it's one of the first shows that I remember ending. So I think he's making a plea for The Wonder Years to be the full experience.
Yeah.
Good suggestion, Andrew. Thanks. We will put that on the list. Finally, Nikki writes, here's a breakdown of what I spend my streaming service money on. Locked in, the ones I blindly pay and will never cancel: Netflix, YouTube Premium, and Philo. I get them once a year, usually as a gift with a gift certificate: Max, Peacock, Paramount Plus, sometimes Shudder and Viki, but always a year at a time. These are things like Mother's, Father's Day, birthdays, etc. And then things I get with a gift card: Hulu with Disney and Apple TV. Right now, we are paid through August on Hulu. Apple TV, I get a year at a time. My husband gets the gift cards for doing well at work. Rotating channels: through Amazon, because they're easy to pick up and cancel, Hallmark Mysteries and Movies, PBS, BritBox, Acorn, Stars, MGM. Most of the time, these are because of a sale for 3-month price. Then I drop them because I'm either done or because they'll continue a different discount later and I'll pick it up then.
Right on.
Thanks, Nikki, for sending that along. That's an interesting way of looking at that stuff. And I think a lot of people will probably get some ideas by hearing that. That is it for this episode of Cordkillers. Our website is cordkillers.com. Our email address is cordkillers@gmail.com. And we are live on twitch.tv/Night Attack Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I reckon we'll talk to you next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.